Was Bruce Lee a martial artist? Alright, I made a video a couple of days ago talking about the steps on becoming a martial artist, in my opinion. Right? Um, do I consider Bruce Lee to be a martial artist? Like, has he traveled that journey? Bruce Lee was interested more in street combat, real life situation, in fighting, right? He wasn't too much interested in competition, right? But did he do enough to be able to teach street combat? Did he get enough experience to be able to teach street combat, right? Did he have the steps to be that martial artist to instruct people, right? In my opinion, yes, he did. And I'm going to guide you through the reasons why, in my opinion, Bruce Lee was a martial artist. As far as his movies, his philosophies, his writings, we see all that. So we know from his movies, what he was teaching and instructing and demonstrating in his movies. He was going towards more of a realistic situation. Even from his concept, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist or foot, right? It was more towards for street combat, right? So, in my opinion, he had the steps to becoming a martial artist, right? Or to be a martial artist, right? These are my steps on traveling that path towards being a martial artist, like I mentioned in my other video. At least competition, test your techniques out in a competitive sport, right? It could be boxing, kickboxing, point sparring, right? A street fight. Not getting into a street fight, but if you ever had a street fight back in the days, or you happen to just get into one that you didn't start just for self-defense reasons, right? Also, being under pressure, being pushed, right? Being pushed by somebody that is gonna challenge you, that is gonna make you break under pressure, or being pressured to the point of exhaustion, where you're just winded, you have nothing more left in you, and you have to resort to something that you probably would never do, right? Also, my next step is training with other people, training with other martial artists who are better than you, right? Other martial artists who can teach you something that you never know, that you never knew, right? Who can guide you in the path to a higher level, right? So exchanging techniques, brainstorming each other, right? Those are my steps. So Bruce Lee had street fights when he was younger, right? But nothing recorded, obviously. Just like I had street fights, but they were never recorded. I just said I had street fights, right? But he had street fights when he was younger, and I believe there was one documentary, a video, where a guy was saying that he beat Bruce Lee when he was younger. So, you're gonna win some street fights, you're gonna lose some, as I said, right? Nobody's invisible, right? Just like competition. Depends on what sport you're doing, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, not all the time you're gonna win every single fight. Sometimes losing is a good thing because you can learn from your loss and come back stronger and win the next 20 fights, right? So Bruce Lee had street fights. Bruce Lee also competed in amateur boxing, I believe at his high school, right? I'm not sure if he was ever a champion in it, but he competed, right? He tested his skills against other people, right? Bruce Lee was also a cha-cha champion, an instructor, right? He could move around lightly on his foot. That was from the dancing, right? That's why if you are able to can dance and have a kind of rhythm when it comes to boxing, kickboxing, martial arts, you will have that rhythm, good timing. Because remember, with dancing, you're moving in and out, moving in circular motion laterally. So when you're fighting, kind of the same concept, bouncing in and out, get your timing right, set your distance, get your range right, to implement your techniques so you can hit your opponent before your opponent can even realize it, and then you move back out. So if you have good dance movements, good rhythm, good footwork, that will help you a lot in martial arts, right? So Bruce Lee was a cha-cha champion, right? Bruce Lee's first martial art instructor was Ip Man, which he learned Wing Chun from, right? From Wing Chun, I believe he was incorporating Chinese Kung Fu. Then there was some Chinese boxing in there too, mixed in. Then, he implemented some of his amateur boxing along with it. And then from there on, he started to train with other martial artists, regardless of the style they were. Because he was more going towards realistic street fighting techniques. But Bruce Lee himself wasn't a competitor fighter, right? He wasn't a combat sport fighter, right? So he wasn't the one to go into the ring and win trophies and fight for money, right? But he would train with people who were competitive in combat sports, right? Which I'm going to get to that. Bruce Lee would train consistently, develop the body, which I forget to mention. That's one next step I forgot to mention. The physical attributes, physical, mental, physically, right? How you fuel your body, your diet, your lifestyle, right? The food you eat. So Bruce Lee would exercise consistently, jump rope, jogging, lifting weights, doing his martial arts. But he would fuel his body with healthy foods, fruits, vegetables, protein shakes, and he would stay away from refined sugars, refined flour, right? Like cookies and cakes and stuff like that. Also, if you notice from earlier with Bruce Lee physique, he started to get more lean at the end of his career, right? In the beginning, he's a little bit more, had more fat in him. But there were stories that from the Wang Jackman fight, he actually gassed out in that fight. But even though he won, but he was gassed in that fight. He was tired because of his conditioning, endurance, right? So he wanted to work on that. So he knew that he needed to be more physically active. So cross training. So he would incorporate cycling, jump rope, different variety of exercises, weightlifting. And by doing those consistently, he started to drop a lot of body fat. And that's why he looked the way he looked, because he was working a lot on his endurance. And that fight he had, taught him that. That's why I say it's good to, have competition, and even if it's an organized fight, which the Wang Jackman fight was a kind of organized fight, right? It wasn't like he was just on the street and he got into a fight, That fight was put together. But he learned from that fight that he needed better conditioning and he needed to cross train, not just the act of, practicing the techniques, doing the formation, doing the blocks, punches, kicks, and so forth. You needed to add other attributes to your training, which again is cross training, like what he's doing here, the bicycle, the stationary bicycle, lifting weights, jump roping, jogging, different variety of exercises that is going to work different parts of the body and push you mentally and physically to the point of exhaustion, which is being under pressure too, right? Because cardio is not an easy thing, especially when you're cross training. Every other day you're doing a different kind of conditioning for endurance workout. It can be very stressful on the body, right? So this is Bruce Lee here lifting weights. As I said, he incorporate all different type of workout, into his training, along with his lifestyle, eating. Some people gonna say diet, but it's a lifestyle when it comes to the food you put into your body. So for Bruce Lee, it was just all natural foods, natural carbs. It wasn't any refined sugars and breads, which is going to make him puffy, right? So he would just eat a lot of high energy foods. Remember, your body is electrical, so you eat a lot of electrical foods. So when you put it in your body, all you're getting is just straight energy. That's why he was so energetic, because the way how he fueled his body, right? You can see from his body here, as I said, he changed throughout his training. When he fought Wang Jackman, he wasn't as ripped and lean as this. The Wang Jackman fight is what changed him into this specimen you see right here, because he learned from that fight that he needed a little more than just the martial art techniques. You needed to be in physical shape, physical, mentally, physical shape, right? Which entails developing the body, conditioning. Your body has to be conditioned in order to go through with the combat, right? So if your body is not developed properly, you won't last in the combat that you're getting into. It could be real life situation or sport. So he found out from the Wang Jumpman fight that he has to prepare his body in a way for that combat. Just like any sport you're playing too, you have to prepare your body for that sport. If you don't condition your body for that particular sport you're doing, your body won't last. Your body will break down on you, right? It's a mental thing too, but you also have to prepare physically also for it, unless you just won't be able to go through with it, right? And he figured that out from the Wang Jackman fight. That's why I say it's very important to go through certain experiences in your life, because through the experiences, that is where you're going to learn, which is going to make you into a better martial artist. This picture has been done in Soto, one of his students. But Danina Soto also was a screamer practitioner, Filipino stick fighting, right? Also, he had karate and judo. So Bruce Lee was also training with him, and they were sharing ideas, as well as Danina Soto was Bruce Lee's student, but they were still brainstorm up with each other and practice together, right? This is Joe Louis, a competitor, full contact fighter, endpoint fighter, kickboxing, right? Joe Louis trained with Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee trained with Joe Louis, right? Because Bruce Lee knew that whatever street combat that he was developing, he would have to train with people who were kind of on that path of combat, which was Joe Louis at the time, was a champion in kickboxing, in point fighting, right? So he would train with Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee would train with him, so they would exchange ideas, brainstorming, right? Joe Louis, practitioner karate, Shorin-ryu, and then Bruce Lee taught him, his Jeet and some Wing Chun concepts too, right? But as I said, they both trained together, and that's where Bruce Lee would develop a lot of his techniques for his Jeet from people like Joe Louis, Danina Soto, who taught Bruce Lee the nunchucks. Right? That's the first time Bruce Lee knew about the nunchucks was from Danina Soto, right? Also, Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee trained with Chuck Norris also. Before Bruce Lee met Joe Louis or Chuck Norris, he would only kick low kicks only, right? To the knee, maybe to the ankles, to the shin, right? He would never do any high kicks, right? When he met Joe Louis and Chuck Norris, they taught him, how to throw higher kicks, like high moashigeris, front snap kicks, spinning back kicks, spinning heel kicks, because he saw Chuck Norris, Joe Louis using it in competition, and he wanted to incorporate it into his training, which he added it into his Jeet concepts, right? That's why I always say that it's good to train with other martial artists, because there are millions of people out there, different sizes, different styles of martial arts, that you can always pick up techniques from. right? And brainstorm and learn from them. Also, here is Ed Parker, who Bruce Lee also trained with too, right? It's a picture here with Joe Louis and Chuck Norris. They both competed together, right, in kickboxing and point fighting. Joe Louis and Chuck Norris were both fighters. They were both competitors. You can say combat sports, right? So Bruce Lee wanted to develop street fighting, techniques for the street, but he was never a competitor in any sport, right? Except for he did amateur boxing and had some street fights here and there. But he needed to develop, techniques for the street. And the only way that he could have done that in his mind, because Bruce Lee was pretty smart, right, was to train with people who is basically in combat sports, which simulates real life fighting, right? So this is full contact fighting. This is the closest you're probably going to get to a street fight, right? Again, street fight entails weapons, right? Extension of the hands, like knives, guns, name it, right? So it's not 100% like full contact fighting, and it will never be, but it's a simulation though, where you can get the feeling of it, being like a street fight. So he kind of knew that, so he wanted to train with guys who were actually fighting in competition, who was like Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, and I believe some other guys who he would also train with. I believe Bob Wall, a couple other guys he would train with too. But he would incorporate karate techniques into whatever he was doing. That's why you see, in Enter the Dragon, a lot of his movies, he was using a lot of karate movements in it, because he would only use what was effective, because he was more going towards street fighting concepts, combat. So he incorporated a lot of the karate movement, which is from the point fighting, in and out, one hitter quitter techniques. If you see from his kicking, a lot of kicking again, he learned from Chuck Norris, Bob Wall, Joe Louis, a lot of the Mwashigeris, a lot of the side kicks, spinning back kick, a lot of the hook kicks. He got that from karate, right? So Bruce, again, he was a smart guy, man. He never really had to go in there and then compete. He just learned with people who were competing, right? And then incorporate it into his system. Also, John Rhee, Taekwondo master, right? If you want to say, right? He trained with John Rhee also. So he learned a lot of kicking from John Rhee also. There's other people out there too that you learn from. There's James Lee. He had a student named Ted Wong. There was also Jesse Glover, who was a judo practitioner who would teach Bruce judo also, along with Gene LaBelle. That's why you saw in Enter the Dragon in the beginning, he was implementing takedowns and submissions, right? Also in Chinese Connection, he got put in an armbar and he was doing a defense for it, where he would bite to get out of the submission, right? So he was going towards the ground for a long time. He knew about the ground. He was training it with Gene LaBelle, with his other students that had background in judo, in jiu-jitsu also. So he was way ahead of the game, right? He would put on gears, gloves, headpiece, mouthpiece, cup, and he would spar. He would go not all the way out 100%, but he would test his skills to make sure it works. Because that's the only way you're gonna know. You have to put the gears on. You're gonna have to go a little bit hard, right? This is the only way you're gonna learn if your techniques are gonna work. If you're trying to promote street fighting techniques, you're gonna have to test your techniques out. So whatever he would learn from Joe Louis, Chuck Norris, he would practice it on a daily basis, right? Through sparring, right? And as I said, he would spar daily. Majority of his training would just be on a realistic situation, and he would put the gears on because, again, when you're sparring and you only have knuckles and there's nothing covering over those knuckles. If you ever got hit with bare knuckle before, just a good hit can open up your skin. you know if you don't know even how to punch properly, just having bare knuckles, it depends on who you're training with too. The person that you're training with could also break the hand if they don't know how to hit properly, right? So wearing the gears was for safety, and also you were able to go hard, right, without injuring your opponent. Like I said, when you're bare knuckles, you get one hit, it could be 80%, you could do some serious damage. But with the gears on and the headpiece, you don't really take that much damage, right? It doesn't, you can avoid getting cuts and possibly even knocked out, right? This picture here is Bruce Lee, and I believe it's Dana Soto. And it was a sparring match, but I think this was more of a simulation, from what I've heard. And it was more of just exchanging techniques, like a self-defense kind of thing. But it was just showing that, his speed more, and his countering, and his defense and offense, right? So it wasn't like a full-on fight, but the shots were throwing probably looks like 80, 70%, 60%. He wasn't really holding back on the techniques. You can watch a video online, just put Bruce Lee sparring, and you can see, right? So in my opinion, Bruce Lee was a martial artist. He had all the steps, in my opinion, towards being a martial artist, which I mentioned: the competitive attributes with the amateur boxing, the street fights, also the physical lifestyle of what you're putting into your body to fuel your body, mentally, discipline aspect, he had that too. Bruce was a little arrogant, but he knew that if he wanted to be the best that he could be in the martial arts, and to showcase his skills in the movies and real life situation, he would have to train with people that were better than him. So again, he would train with other martial artists, different martial artists out there in different systems, from Gene LaBelle to Kempo Karate, Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, just name a few, Dan Soto, so that's the next step towards being a martial artist. Like I mentioned, training with different people, learning from different people who know more than you, not just training with somebody that doesn't know anything and you're just beating them up on a daily basis. That doesn't make any sense. You have to train with other people that are going to push you towards being a better martial artist. And in return, you're going to learn a lot more, and it's going to make you a way better person mentally and physically also, So of course, Bruce Lee is a martial artist.